one of my gifts is that I'm really good at projecting the road that we're on. And I could see that the road that we were on in the way that we were leading the business was not going to be good. If we don't see light at the end of the tunnel of figuring this out in the end of the next 6 months, we'll hang closed on the door and we will walk away.
Even to the point where I worked for a long time with a leader who left his body almost literally on the wayside, fought behind.
Every decision I make today has a future. So if I make my decisions based on the future that I want, then I can actually create that.
Whether you want more innovation more easily, you're feeling burnt out or overwhelmed, or you simply know that something isn't quite the way you know it can be, you are not alone. I hear the same from leaders every day. On Uncommon Leadership, we explore aligning personal fulfillment with business success, creating authentic teams, and cultivating the resilience, adaptability, and ease necessary to move beyond simply surviving today's challenges into thriving. I'm Michael Hunter with Uncommon Teams, and today we'll uncover fresh insights into what it means to lead in today's world. And joining me today is Chad Brown. Chad is a scaling strategist and coach. He founded a media production studio called Shade Tree Films in 2008 that has serviced global companies such as Volkswagen, Target, and Pixar animation studios. This is where his love and passion for leadership and business was developed. He sold that company in 2021. Over the last 7 years, he has trained and developed creative entrepreneurs who want to increase their profit and work less. When he is not helping others create more freedom in their business, you will find, or not be able to find, Chad on a wild adventure in the mountains for this family. He resides at the foot of the Rocky Mountains in Orem, Utah, with his wife, Katie, and 3 children. Welcome, Chad.
Thanks for having me, Michael. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yes, even to the point where I worked for a long time with a leader who would go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, scheduled meetings, ad hoc meetings, hallway meetings. So it'd be like 6 hours. He hadn't eaten, hadn't had anything to drink, hadn't been to the restroom, which he needed to do for 4 of those 6 hours.
Yeah.
Because he was always so interested in that next meeting, so got his validation from talking with that next person, helping them solve their problem, that he left his body almost literally on the wayside, fought behind. What was it that tipped the needle for you there, that you went from, this is just the way things are, to all of a sudden, no, this isn't going to work. I can't do this another day?
There were a few things. My kids would, at least my older daughter, would cry every time I was leaving because she knew it would, she didn't know when I would be back. I mean, I could tell her, but a 4-year-old mind and understanding all of that felt like forever for me to be home in 5, 6, 7 days. So that became increasingly hard to do. It hadn't got to the point where we were missing deadlines and stuff like that in the sense of my leadership, but I could see that road. One of my gifts is that I'm really good at projecting the road that we're on. And I could see that the road that we were on in the way that we were leading the business was not going to be good. If we kept taking these contracts and having the same issues we were having with our team, we were going to find ourselves in a really bad situation. And finally, just feeling like, and lastly, I would say, feeling like I just didn't know my wife anymore. Like we weren't partners, we were roommates, acquaintances. When we were together, it was to-do lists and logistics and, all of that sort of stuff. We weren't dating. We weren't taking opportunities to just connect. And I was really missing that. I was starving for it. I didn't recognize that right at first, but then as I started thinking about it, when you're on the road you have so much time to think. And on airplane rides, sitting at airports, and all of that sort of stuff. And I think at one moment I thought, wow, this isn't how I imagined my marriage to be. And I think that was like opening the Pandora's box of like, okay, what's going on here? Why are we willing to sacrifice that for the business? So it was a lot of things.
What was it that made it that 101st time your daughter cried when you left? That 101st time that you realized every time you're talking with your wife, it was just logistics and not love. That the 101st time that you looked forward and said, oh, this isn't sustainable. This isn't going to be sustainable for much longer. What was it that 101st time that made it the time that made you switch?
I'm a very decisive person. I don't, once I recognize, or once I'm pretty sure that's the decision that I'm going to make, I don't waste any time. I don't waste a lot of time thinking about it or planning it out. Sometimes that's to my benefit. It's certainly been to my benefit in times. Starting that business, that was to my benefit. As soon as I saw the opportunity, boom, I was on it. And so when I realize something isn't working or I want something new, I just decide and I go after it. A lot of times when I tell this story, me and my business partner, when we made the realization, we put 6 months on it. Literally, we put it on the calendar. If we don't have this figured out, or we don't see light at the end of the tunnel of figuring this out in the end of the next 6 months, we'll hang closed on the door and we will walk away. And I've just always been a decisive person in that way. When I see what I want, I go get it. And so it was just the natural next step for me. Once I saw the light, once I saw the lie, right, that my coach, Adrian, showed me, once I saw that, it wasn't even a choice at that point. It was like, okay, this is what has to happen.
What was it that crystallized all that into focus for you? All these feelings that had been sort of in the background, shifting around, suddenly crystallized. You're like, oh, there's a decision to make, and this is what I'm going to make.
Yeah. It was future pacing. Like I talked about, seeing that road that it was going down. I was headed toward divorce. I was headed towards a terrible relationship with my kids. I was headed towards more overwhelm, all of that sort of stuff. So as I future pace those decisions, I realized that wasn't the future I was interested in. And so a course needed to be changed. And so to crystallize it, or to actually bring it to the now, which I realized is every decision I make today has a future. So if I make my decisions based on the future that I want, then I can actually create that. But if I make the decisions based on what's most urgent now, or who's the loudest, or what you talked about validation earlier, and I think this is a really important point for me to get into this conversation, which is I also came to the realization that all of what I was doing wasn't for my family, it was for my ego. When I was at work, I'm really good at what I do, and people would recognize me for that. And we started speaking from stages at industry conferences, and after, when we would deliver a product, they were over the moon about it. And so all of that validation and ego food was what I was after. So realizing that I was making the decisions based off of that short-term instant gratification of feeling really good about myself was what was leading us down that road. So I could take it to in that context, I could take it to the now and say, if you make this next decision based on what your ego wants, you're going to continue to have the future that you have. You're going to continue to have more of what you have now. But if you make a different decision, a different metric which to measure your decisions off of, you can change it.